Welcome back to the offensive line. On this episode, we have Joseph.
Hello, everyone.
Who will be sharing with us his experiences and his knowledge about evangelism as he leads a ministry at our church called the Fishing Club, which is to build up individuals and just their thinking and their evangelism experience. And he'll be sharing on the question, why do you think that? So Joseph, do you have any thoughts on this question, any words of wisdom for us to kind of gain from what you have to say?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Hanson.
Yes.
This question is so fundamental. Why do you think that? Why do you think that? It gets to a favorite verse I have, Proverbs 23:7. That verse says that as a man thinks within himself, so he is. So whenever we learn about why people think the way they do or what they think, we also learn about who they are. And when we learn about who they are, we're better able to address their needs. We're better able to share the gospel in a way that they can understand and that they can intake.
Yeah.
So it's such a critical question.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, I think it is a question that you can really ask with anything, right? Because why do you think that? It's not particularly like a Christian evangelism question per se, but it's one that you can definitely use in evangelism because you're just asking why, really. So what question would you maybe start off with, or in what kind of situations would you ask that question? Like, you know, they've already talked about something else in particular, and then you would ask that, or like.
Yeah, let me give you two examples. The first example is in cold contact, meaning when we approach someone out on the streets, in a food court, whatever.
Sure.
And I will usually ask them, one of my favorite questions is, do you have value? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how much value do you have? And usually everyone will say something around like 6 or 7. I haven't heard a 10 yet. I haven't heard anything below a 5 yet either. So it's usually like 6 or 7.
Average.
And then
people like to be average.
Exactly. Yeah. Humble brag. 6 or 7, and then I ask, why do you think that? And the purpose of that question is so that they start to think, well, why do I think that? And without the Bible, they have no reason to say that they have objective value. Genesis 1:27 tells us that we are created in the image of God, and therefore we have infinite value. We are all 10s in that sense. Yeah. But a non-Christian doesn't have a basis to say that they are a 6 or 7, or actually that they are a 10. So that's a really good question to get into how they think.
Yeah.
My second example is from more personal evangelism. And I have a good friend, and he's more politically conservative, but he's not a Christian. And so I find it really interesting because he believes in things like objective value, objective meaning, right and wrong, and he has even expressed that he wants to teach his kids according to these moral principles, but he does not believe in God. And so my question to him is, well, why do you think that? And I personally just really want to get to know him, but also it pushes him a little bit just to think about, can I believe in these things without God, without the Bible?
Yeah. Nice. And then that second example that you bring up with your friend who is conservative but doesn't believe in Christianity, has not placed his faith in Christ. If I remember correctly, that friend is from law school.
That's correct.
And I think it's really cool that we've had so many different guests on the offensive line have talked about what evangelism looks like for them personally in the different environments that God has placed them in. Rennie, who is in the academia with being in the PhD, or soon being in the PhD program, with Aaron, who talked about what it looks like as being in the military, and then now you, as someone who is in law school, just finished your first year of law school, and sharing about evangelism there. Yeah. So what does evangelism look like? It doesn't have to be this question per se, but what does evangelism look like for you, and how has it changed from before when you were in working industry and now you're in school again?
Yeah, that's a fun question. I think in school generally, you have the opportunity to create, at least for me, like longer friendships. Like I got to hang out with these guys, especially this friend, for the course of a whole year. Essentially, we had the same classes in law school, and there's more personality to it too. And there's that time that we can hang out and go golfing, play games together to build that relationship. And so when I ask questions like these, they have that personal relationship with me, and so they're motivated to think about. It would be impolite for a stranger to ignore such a question like this, but even more so for a friend. And so I feel like I have a good into his life and a good avenue to see how he actually lives the things that he says.
For sure. Thanks for sharing, Joseph. That's very, very interesting, like, how you might lead up to that question. But what about afterwards? What's a question, or how would you direct the conversation after you asked them, why do you think that?
Yeah. In the first example where I talked to the guy about, how much do you value yourself or how much do you value others around you, he was stumped. Like he couldn't give a reason why. And I would, try to poke a little bit or try to nudge a little bit, trying to get him, I think, a little bit more. Maybe it's he arrived at those thoughts based on his family or based on his environment. But at the end of the day, I want to direct him to Scripture. I want to direct him to the Bible that gives reason for that.
Yeah, well, that's good. I was gonna ask, like, when do you segue to the Bible? So
yeah. Usually when they're kind of stumped.
In that situation.
Exactly. I'll bring out my Bible, and usually Genesis 1:27 is a great verse for so many different topics. Again, the image of God gives us that infinite value. And there we go. For the friend that we were talking about, now that's a different approach. He's a friend, and so he's going to have a lot to say. And as I mentioned, I'm just curious about who he is. I'd ask follow-up questions. In this example with my friend, he said he is something of a deist, which means that he believes that God is somewhere out there. We haven't finished this conversation yet, so you can be praying for this.
For sure.
But my next move is, well, even if you're a deist, there's some things that don't match up, right? Like personality, right? A deist is an arbitrary kind of impersonal God, but God, the God of the Bible, he is personal, and that's why we can communicate and have a relationship with him and then with one another. So that's another thing that I wanted to talk about with him is if you believe in a deist God, like how does that translate into your relationship with your fiance or with your friends, right? Where is that personality coming?
Yeah, no, I mean, we'll definitely be praying for that. I think, the viewers, if you're listening, you're watching, definitely be praying for Joseph, asking questions. You can leave comments in the leave a comment in the comment section down below about how you are praying for Joseph. Hopefully we are all praying for that conversation. But then another question I was just thinking about too is, I've known you for a while, Joseph, and I think there's been a lot of transitions in your life. You know, undergrad at UCSD, and then bachelor's and then master's, and then going into the biotech industry, working for a pharmaceutical company, and then going to law school, right? And then, of which you just finished your first year, and then going back now for the summer, going into an internship, a law internship. Yeah. So we've already talked about the transition or what evangelism looks like between school and the workplace, but what about different industries? So the pharmaceutical, more of a science-minded industry versus law, which is more of a legal rhetoric and all this other stuff going on in the legal system. Like, people think differently in the different environments. So what does that look like? How does that change your evangelism, or has it changed your evangelism?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think in the legal industry, people are slightly tend towards being more down to have a conversation and to go back and forth. I think in the biotech industry, generally, I found that people were more willing to agree to disagree type of thing. But in the law field, people really...
Because they like to argue.
Kind of, yes. Yeah. So that's a pro. At the same time, though, we would like to think, these lawyers, they want to be right, or if they're wrong, they want to be corrected. But that's still not true, right? The Bible tells us that you need the Spirit in order to understand the spiritual things of God.
Sure, yeah.
And that's exactly 1 Corinthians 2. And that is still true.
Yeah.
That is still true.
Thanks for sharing with us, Joseph, on this episode of The Offensive Line. Hopefully you viewers, you were blessed by what Joseph had to share, his wisdom and his experience in evangelism. He is just such a great example of it in our church. And if you have any questions or comments on anything that he said, anything that we've both talked about already, you can leave it in the comment section down below. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you want to see some more behind the scenes footage or video clip or pictures of what our setup looks like. If you like this video, please like it. Please give us a like. If you haven't yet subscribed to our video, to our channel, then please do so as well. As we go through this series on Great Evangelists Ask Great Questions, hopefully you will be able to join us week after week as we hope to give you different tools and to add to your toolkit so that you can go out and have conversations. You can be great evangelists asking great questions. So we are The Offensive Line. Hopefully you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you next week.